there's two main models of growth which really exist. Model number one, which we talked about last time, is what I'll call something like traditional growth, which means what does that mean in the Torah sense? As we discussed last time, it's where you learn Torah, you take the kind of like light from spiritual sources, you take that into your head, and from there you make a transition from your head to your heart, and you change yourself basically in that way. And that's like the slow, steady way where you actually are able to not be able to do something, and then after some time of work, days, weeks, months, years, you find that you're actually able to do something. You're able to relate to things in a different way. You're able to relate to people, the world, in a different way. So there's one kind of growth which is like the slow, steady, what I'll call it the traditional growth model. It's like a top down. But there is another category as well, which is what I call something like hacks. So there are ways that you can gain the skills or mitzvot or anything that you need to gain without necessarily going through the traditional path. There's a way to help yourself along those journeys from a sort of side route. So that's what we want to discuss today. One example of that, and hopefully next week we'll have at least time for at least one more example of the hack as well. So I was wondering about calling the course Kabbalistic Life Hacks, but we didn't go for that in the end. But nevertheless, we are going to try and see what we can do to help us along in life using certain deeper sources. So anyway, today, with that in mind, I think you can see on the source sheets, we are talking about our environments and thinking about those. So just before we go on to the exact thing, the pasuk in Mishlei says over there, so it says, Yishmach Chacham v'Yosef Lekach, a wise person will listen or will hear and they'll add more. So that's an interesting thing. The Maharal goes into that, of like the idea of being a Chacham, of being a wise person, isn't so much about what you have, it's about what you want to have. It's not so much about the knowledge that's already inside you, but it's about your approach to knowledge. The fact that you want more knowledge, that's what makes you a Chacham, which is just like amazing, because we talked about this, if anyone was here for talk about the four sons that are Bavanim, it just means that like I can also be a Chacham. Like I don't really, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to, contain so much inside me, but I can want knowledge. So that's what you see from this pasuk. That's the definition of Chacham. Not really our point today. But the next pasuk is v'navon tachbolot yikneh, and a person who has understanding, they'll acquire tachbolot, which is like strategies or tricks. But basically, this is the source in the verse for what we're talking about. That there's another really important thing for avodat Hashem and for living the best life, which is that we have strategies, that we are able to like tachbolot is also the kind of things that you talk about even in in a military context or in any other like very practical context. Avodat Hashem isn't just about doing it; it's about finding ways. So that's partly what we're going to talk about today for one example of that, which is really important. So right, so on to the exact topic of the day in terms of environmental influences. So I'll just tell you interesting case. There's a guy, a student of mine, just got married. Very, very nice story. He came from, he was most recently in Australia, I think Melbourne, I think. And this was when I was just meeting. I do some stuff at the Ulpan, so I get to meet a lot of new immigrants. So anyway, so he was telling me, so you asked, what were you up to before now? And he said his job was he sold supercars. I think sorry, luxury cars. I don't know really what these things are, so I assume those are not exactly the same. But they have. Sure. You get communication from abroad. So he sold luxury cars, which is like, I don't know, is that a big business in Melbourne? I'm not sure. Are there people driving nice cars? Yeah, okay, fine. So, and the truth is the standard of car here has like gone like way up. Not really sure why. It used to be that like everyone had a rubbish car, now only 80% of people have a rubbish car. And then like 20% of people have a really nice car. I'm not really sure how that happens in terms of like wealth, whatever. But anyways, So I asked, so I said, like, are you interested in trying to continue that in some shape or form here? And he said no, because he said it's really, really hard in that industry to be honest. Um, because he said the honest truth is no car is perfect. Everything has a upside and a downside. You're in sales, and they want to know that their car is perfect. They don't know. The person who's purchasing thinks there's a perfect car out there. It's not really the reality. So if you tell them, it's got this problem, you'll never make really any sales. So he says he wanted to get, he was, as he had moved to Israel, and moved out of that location, he also wanted to move out of that industry. He felt it was too hard for him to be able to keep to his values in that particular context. So I think that's a brave move. I say I'm not sure how much business there is for that here. Maybe there is or it isn't. But he made it for kind of moral reasons anyway, which is pretty admirable. And so this is a an example of where one sees that their context is going to affect them. It's just in some contexts are healthier than others for making good decisions in life, for being your best self, for keeping true to your values. Some contexts are easier than others. Did anyone have any examples themselves that they would want to share, either of themselves or others, where you find yourself in a healthy context or a very unhealthy context and sort of seeing consequences of that? Eliana?
So it was motorcycle.
Interesting. Yeah. What was the dishonest part of it?
To be honest, but he saw so many other people being dishonest.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting in terms of honesty that I could say my wife has to some extent this experience in the realm of auditing. So it's like education Torah matter, right? So the matter of the day is there's accountants who do the finances, auditors who check the accountants' work essentially. So basically, you need to check that they've accounted for everything correctly. So there's a motivation for everything to be fine, because if everything's not fine, then it's a big ordeal if you find a big problem. So it's like so there's like motivation to kind of like sweep things under and like make things work. It's just so hard. So hard. Anyone else for any healthy or unhealthy environments that yeah.
Student politics. There was so much like backstabbing. It's pretty disgusting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's so sad. You very relatively recently got out of university, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What does that mean, student politics? That means like in clubs, or how's it?
For me specifically, it was in like the Jewish Students' Union. So like,
Yeah.
it's probably the worst. The worst, but it's just
Yeah. No, but that's part of the challenge, and this thing can happen. Without mentioning the place, I will say that it's a big tragedy. A friend of mine who was he sort of like wanted to be religious. He was hoping that this would help him, and he joined a religious Jewish company, and they like pushed him the other way because it was like not good. It's not good, which is really sad. It's really sad. Okay, anyone got a positive example for us to uplift us into our yeah.
I won't go into the details, but I just now had an experience that was like very similar to previous experiences I've had. But like because of the people who are around me here, and not just here, but like in the religious community, where like one person who was part of it, like I never met them before, but like those people were like value oriented people, and they were, whereas like previously when I'd been in such a situation, there was no one who was like had like actual like values guiding them in this way. There was no one to go to for guidance, and like everyone kind of did like just things that served themselves. Whereas like in this situation, like they were doing things that served themselves, but because they were like value oriented people, like it also served me, and they were trying to protect me too. And that's because I'm like, in a more value-oriented environment now that this situation has turned out completely differently than the last time I was in this situation.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. Meaning, are you implying that even though your values were not necessarily the same, you're implying that?
My values weren't the same before. The values of the people around me weren't there.
Yeah.
And like none of us had like clarity on like what it means to be good to other people. And so people got hurt. But now that I'm in this environment, like there are stricter boundaries about like what it means to be a good person and like how to try to protect yourself and others at the same time.
Yeah, it's Baruch Hashem, it's good to it's good to get these things and yeah.
Also, I will say also because my values are different now, like I'm able to also not only like see that like this is good for me, but to accept that like the guidance they're giving is actually, whereas previously if somebody had given me this guidance, I would have been like, well, that's silly, like that's just like antiquated or old-fashioned religious stuff.
That's also interesting. Yeah, there's something interesting about that. I think so this is not like a pro MRC propaganda shiur, but you're allowed to like your environment. That's okay. But there are lots of different kinds of these environments, and just to kind of like validate people's experiences in this realm, and also to some extent push us a little bit. Just have a little look at the Rambam over here. So Rambam says as follows. He says, "Derech briato shel adam liot nimshach b'deotav u'ma'asav achar re'av v'chavirav." The nature of the human being is to be drawn after the mindset and the actions of their friends, the people who are close to them, and to act like the people are acting where you are. Lefikach tzarich adam litchaber letzadikim. Therefore, so he says, okay, so far so good, we described. Okay, but now what? So he says, lefikach tzarich adam litchaber letzadikim. So therefore, you should try and attach yourself to good people. Uliyashev etzel hachachamim tamid. And you should always try and live, in close to wise people, so that you'll learn from them. V'yit rachek min, and then what's the other side of it? V'yit rachek min harashaim halchim b'chashech kedei shelo yilmod mima'aseim, and then you'll at the same time distance yourself from those who are walking in the darkness. That's a like pretty good description of certain things, so that you won't learn from them. And so the Rambam turns this description into an obligation. If it's the case that we are affected by our environment and the relationships that we have, so the work that you can do is to have good relationships, is to try and as much as possible be around decent people. I like what he's saying here because I think these are two things which I never really thought about separating, but just as people are speaking, I'm realizing maybe the Rambam relates to it too, is that one thing is the relationship itself, connection to people, and then another thing is just like the general context that creates. So even if like with you can have one without the other, basically is what I'm saying. So even if you don't have like maybe like don't have like the best relationships, but it's still like a good environment, or you're not in such a healthy environment, but you can find one or two people who are really good for you. So that seems like there's something that the Rambam is pointing to us. Point us towards over here, that we should try and do this. And so this is a big thing, this is a big thing in life. This is a big thing in careers. As we've discussed, careers are a big time where, at some point something practical has to happen and you need to actually like do some work. And it's hard to find, like healthy environments. And so people are thinking about, what kinds of jobs they should go into. A consideration it can't be your only consideration. There are obviously others as well, but a significant consideration should be, who are the people that you're going to be connecting to? Who are the, what are the values in that setting? What are the difficulties which may be inherent in the thing? Just going into it too much, but there are certain jobs which are inherently sort of brutal from a morality perspective, meaning to say, like for example, anyone here a family lawyer? So if yeah, yeah. Okay. So here's how family law works. Sorry, it doesn't have to work like this. I do know one, maybe two exceptions. The way family law works, if you're dealing with divorces and stuff. So what the way that it works is the the more you ruin people's lives, the more you get paid. Because you get paid by the hour. So there's an incentive to drag things out longer. The worst thing you can do for children in a divorce is drag things out longer. But things are already bad. Let's get something done and move on in a healthy way. But then your paycheck is lower. So if you think of that challenge, like how difficult would that challenge be to deal with? Your paycheck is dependent on someone else's misery, and that's the norm in the. I don't mean to offend. As I say, there are exceptions to the rule, but I literally know one, maybe two. But the second one's retired, so I haven't like spoken to him about this. But I know one. It's a friend of my wife who she's like a family lawyer, and she's a tzadika. But it's almost impossible to do that. Like, so you just have to think about like the natural pressures, even aside from just like the actual relationship, but like the natural pressures of your environment when you're thinking about careers. It's just something which is really important to think about. Do you want to?
She was a family lawyer, like, you know, she never said anything like, "Oh, I felt the need to drag things out," but that was the environment that people are trying to tear each other apart and like drag people through the mud, or like, you know, bad mouthing each other to their kids and and just the environment of being in that. So I think even if you are the exception in this friend of your life, like you're going to be up against someone who's not the exception.
Yeah.
And your clients may not be the exception.
Yeah.
Either.
Yeah.
And then, fine.
So it's a good point. Yeah, even 100%. So anyway, so this is just but on the other hand, of course, then there's there's very positive things as well. And so it's just interesting, like sometimes in life, it could be that maybe you'll get paid a little bit less, but you'll be in a healthy environment. Like it's just I'm not here to make people's like life decisions for them, but it's it's important consideration. The Rambam says that it's something that we need to consider. It certainly should be something that we need to consider. That's for sure. Okay, so so far so good, or not, but at least there's something that we can at least try and do about this. Again, even if one is in the difficult environments, then they can attach themselves at least to good people if they have like a good friend or two, a good kind of mentor figure or two. These things can help a lot. But there's something else I want to show you today as well, which is a topic which we'll try and understand a bit in and of itself, and it's something which can help us a lot. And just to kind of clarify the point of what we're saying over here is that this is why it's a bit like a hack, is to put yourself in a good environment, for example. So like in general, like your willpower is only so strong, right? Like you can only try so hard to make the right decision in life. Sometimes you need help to make the right decision in life. So context is one of the things which can help you make better decisions in life. So that's kind of why it's like you can kind of get to a place where you're making better decisions by changing the environment, and that's another way to do it. In addition to working on yourself for like years and years and years, really trying so hard to make decisions. There's like a side road as well into doing that. Okay, so with that, so let's talk a bit about something called the Ohr Makif, and there's a way that we're going to be able to do this even if you find yourself in, practically speaking, very negative environments. There's a spiritual way that you can actually put yourself in a very positive environment. So let's look at that. So the Nefesh HaChaim says as follows: "Is me'et she'ola al tohar machshavat adam la'asot mitzvah." So from the moment a person starts to think about doing a mitzvah, so you've not done any mitzvah yet, but you've just started to, I'm going to do this mitzvah. So what happens? Tikef na'aseh rishumo lamale b'shorsha elyon. Then immediately what's done is there is a impression made up in the spiritual realms, in the roots place of that mitzvah. Livnot v'lintoa kama olamot v'kochot elyonim. And what you do up there, you haven't even done the mitzvah yet, but when you started to think about doing the mitzvah, what you've done over there is you have planted, as he says, many high worlds and forces. We'll try to understand what this means. So you start to think about the mitzvah, you make some impression above in the cosmos, some kind of positive differences are already happening up there. And then it says, Mimela mitorer umamshich gam alav Ohr Makif mehakadusha ha'elyona. And then what happens from there is that you draw down from there something called an Ohr Makif, a surrounding light from that higher place of kedusha, from that place of holiness. So let's read the whole thing. So who Messiah legomra, And this is going to assist you, this Ohr Makif, this surrounding light, is going to assist you to actually complete the mitzvah. Interesting. Va'achar gomro, ha-mitzvah ha-kedosha, and after you finish the holy mitzvah, va'or mistalik l'shorsho, and then the light which goes up back to its source, v'hu inyan schar olam haba, and that's the real idea of schar in olam haba. So a lot to unpack over here, but let's see what we can do to try and do that. Obviously, any questions and comments at any stage. So basically, here's us. We'll start with our stick man. Here's us down here. We are standing here on earth. Very good. And you start to think about doing a mitzvah. Anyone have what was the most recent mitzvah that anyone did over here that they want to share? Say the bracha. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so let's say, which bracha did you say? Do you remember? Okay, good. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. I'm glad you remembered what it was. Okay, so you got the bracha. So now, let's say you've got the water or whatever it is. You've got the water in your hands. See, it's like a high quality picture. You can got the water in the hands, and you know that it's time to make a bracha. So you start thinking, okay, now I'm about to make a bracha. Okay, so what happens at that time? What happens is that there are actually what's called upper sources of the mitzvah. So what does that mean? So we need to go take a trip up for a minute over here. Is that basically like this? So there are several layers of spiritual universes. We have the world that we are in down here, which is called Asiya, which is primarily the world that we see around us. But above our world begin the spiritual realms, the first of which is called Yetzirah, which is the realm of the angels. Above that is Bria, which is the realm of the Kisei HaKavod and the Neshamas. And above that is the realm of Etzilut, which is God's divine realm. So basically you have ascending levels of spirituality, from our world going up and up and up in spirituality until you have something at the top, which is just pure divinity. And so this is kind of like the map, the spiritual map of the worlds. Within that, even though there are 4 primary olamot, but you can subdivide it into different areas, just as any map has like subsections to it. So you have that. There are different ways to subdivide it. There's the sphere, there's all kinds of different things. But the way that we want to think about subdividing it today is into the mitzvot. So each mitzvah actually has a site in, the olamot somewhere, wherever, and then draw 613 of those things. And then that's actually the true source of the mitzvot. The mitzvot are not just something which are good ideas of good things to do, things which help the world run well down here. Sometimes they do, sometimes they're not really anything. I'm not sure if putting on tefillin makes such a difference to like actual practical stuff going on, in a very tangible way. In intangible way, it does. That's what we're going to talk about. But I'm not sure, so not all mitzvahs are like good deeds. I'm not sure if doing tefillin is a good deed. It's a thing that Hashem said to do, which has certain spiritual effects. But basically, etc., etc. So if you go up in all the olamot, you can superimpose a map of 613 spots onto here. I actually don't know this. I don't know if there's mitzvahs which are attached themselves to Atzilut. I'm not sure. Actually, don't know. Good question. So you can do the homework for me. I can ask. You can ask. But at least let's talk about with these realms. Atzilut is tricky because Atzilut is a realm of pure divinity. So on the one hand, it doesn't really seem that we should have any tikkunim to do up there, but the truth is we actually do. And there are certain things that we do which do actually interact with up there. So I just haven't read an explicit source on this point. But the idea is, so when you're doing mitzvah, so you're actually doing something very big. What you're actually doing is that there are the world was created, a world which was amazing but imperfect. And Hashem said that He wants us to partner with Him in the work of creation, and that means to perfect the world, not just the world that we see around us, but also even all the higher worlds as well. So there are different things here which are lacking, there are different things here which are broken, and those things need to be fixed, those things need to be filled in with the light of Hashem, to the extent that we'll have something called tikkun ha'olam, that the world will be completely in a healed and rectified state, and with that, that's actually going to go in to Olam Haba. Olam Haba is the perfected state of this world. Olam Haba is not a different location. Olam Haba is the new and improved, as it were, version of this location, which is the accumulation of all our goods or our mitzvahs. That saying a bracha is over here, let's say. So look what happens when you're about to say bracha. So you've got a glass of water in your hands, or a bottle for that matter, and you think, okay, I'm about to say bracha. Here's what happens at that moment from your thought. So you ignite a spark which is up in the heavens, and you start all sorts of positive stuff starts to happen over there. There's all different kinds of, as you said, you're like building stuff, you're like arranging stuff in a very positive way. So there was something called brokenness in the world, and that's starting to get fixed. Even you haven't even done anything yet. You just started saying, I'm about to do a bracha. That's what you do. What then happens is that it says you draw down from that location. You still haven't done anything yet. You draw down a light around yourself, which is something called the Ohr Makif. So that goes around the person. Meaning, there's two kinds of light which exist, spiritual light. One is called Ohr Panimi, and one is called Ohr Makif, an inner light and a surrounding light. So a lot of us are quite familiar with the inner light. We think about this, the soul is like a light which is on the inside of us. But there's also something called a surrounding light. What often is the case is an Ohr Makif, a surrounding light, is something which is so high in level of spirituality, you can't actually contain it. So it just kind of hovers around you. It just can't make it into some parts of your soul can make it into your body. There's some parts of your soul which are just so spiritual that they can't even make it inside your body, but they're with you, so they're like hovering around you. So it's quite an interesting thing. So yeah.
Wouldn't then the goal to be doing most of your mitzvot in the Atzilon or Bria realm because it's like higher?
So it's a good question. Yes and no. On the one hand, you are achieving, firstly, we don't necessarily know exactly what maps onto different parts. If you did, some people do, like Avram Avinu, this is how the Nefesh HaChaim explains, by the way, how the Avot knew how to keep the Torah. So the Avot, the Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, at least the Chazals explicitly say about Avraham that he kept all of the Torah. I think they say about Yaakov as well. How did you do that? He wasn't given the Torah. So Nefesh HaChaim explains it's because he had the spiritual sensitivity to look up into the heavens and see what tikkunim needed to be done and discern what actions down here would be able to achieve those. So it was basically like he was a scientist. He was like a spiritual scientist. He was able to discern different things which needed to be done and the solutions as to how to go about doing that. So you see that in theory, even though I don't know any of this stuff, maybe by the end of your 2 months in MRC, maybe you will. But Avram did, and he was able to. He would have been able to say, "Oh, what's the needs in Bria today?" So in theory, such a thing is possible. In such a case, on the one hand, what you're doing is something which is higher and more impressive. It's like a bigger, more impressive thing. On the one hand, so there's an advantage. On the other hand, higher is not always the same as most important. So this is like a big thing in life, actually. There are certain things which, like, let's put it like this: like what is on a higher level, humans or angels? So on a hierarchy, angels are on a higher level. Angels are here. Angels' home is here. Your home is over here. So they're on a higher level. But they are less central. But you are, or you say it in the positive, but you are more central to the purpose of creation than angels. Angels are they're like a little bit like robots to some extent. They do the will of God, and that's it. So they're good. They're spiritual forces. They do good. You have something called a decision. You have something called a struggle and a decision. That's what God wanted in creation. He wanted you to have a struggle. He wanted you to have bechira, and he wanted you to try and do what you can to make good decisions, to nevertheless try and have a relationship to him, even in the darkness, all that stuff. So what that essentially does is, in terms of kind of like geography, the angel is higher. But in terms of purpose, you're higher. So similar to mitzvot, there can be a mitzvah which is a little thing down here, there's an Asiyah mitzvah, even though that's not so little, actually, it's like quite amazing, but still, but that might be the most important thing in creation at that time. So that's why, this is one of the things, Pirkei Avos says, like, you should treat a mitzvah chamura and a mitzvah kala, you should treat like big mitzvahs and small mitzvahs, you shouldn't really discern between them, because you don't really know what is the need of the world at that time. So anyway, that's also important. So where we go. All right. So mitzvahs are the deeper idea of mitzvahs is that they're really sites in the spiritual realms. And when we start to think about a mitzvah, we make what's called a rishum, an impression, rishima, excuse me, above, we make an impression. So we start to do some work up there. And then what happens amazingly is it comes and invests in you. So you're gonna help me, I'm gonna help you to help me. So it comes in, it sends down this light called the Ohr Makif, the surrounding. And then basically a person is in this, what I call spiritual sub microclimates. I think with like ecosystems as well, but like basically you have a spiritual microclimate that you're walking around the world, and you're in a different environment to the person next to you. But you just thought about doing mitzvah. You're actually, to some extent, you're kind of up here at that time. You're down here, but you're like in the embassy of up here because it's sending its light, it's sending its environment to you at that time. So that's that next stage. We haven't even done the mitzvah yet. We'll get to that in just a minute. Yeah. Then.
How does it kind of work for like mitzvahs that you're kind of like doing?
That's okay. This is an amazing question. I was hoping to actually come to this as well. So if you think about it, that there are going to be certain advantages of mitzvahs that you're doing a lot of the time. So, if you're doing can you think of an example of that? Or?
I don't know if it counts for like not murdering.
So that one's a little different. That's also interesting. But the negative mitzvahs are a little bit different because the way that those typically work is the way that the Gemara says that you don't necessarily get rewards for just not doing a negative mitzvah. If you have a struggle, then you do get a reward for not doing it. At this moment, I think hopefully it's safe to say no one's too worried about the murder thing. If you are, then you're getting a lot of reward for not acting it out. So that might be a little bit of an exception. And just what does that mean? Just translate that into spiritual terms. What that means is that there are certain sites, as we mentioned, which need tikkun, which are broken, need fixing. There are certain sites which are fine. You just need to not break them. That's the negative. That's the Lotat says. Leave it as it is. If you go and do that thing, then you're negatively interacting with that space, and then we can break things by doing so. So that one, not necessarily. I'll come to you in just a second. But there are certain things which you can do, or you do more constantly. There's some things you do very frequently. For example, at least in principle, you can do Bein Adam L'Chavero almost all day. It's not technically a constant mitzvah, but it's practically could be almost a constant mitzvah to do such things. So there already that affords the opportunity for you to be living in this place of light basically throughout your day, an opportunity. Then there's the actual constant mitzvahs, which there are for example emunah, believing in God and things like that. So again, they're similar with that, but a lot of these sort of require you to tap into them. And I'm now I'm thinking about Hashem, in concept. Okay, so then you're in that mitzvah. If you're not necessarily gonna, as far as I'm aware, you're not necessarily gonna gain the light if you're not really thinking about doing it at all. That's kind of what we've talked about here, is the thinking is a big part of it. But basically in practice and in principle, there are certain things which you could end up having a light around you basically all day. So yeah, that'll be part of it. I think sorry, I have a question first. Yeah.
I was thinking that with the negative mitzvot, the things that you're told not to do, there are Jews who are breaking those pretty much constantly.
Yeah.
Like kosher for example. And maybe we could consider it to be when you do choose to do them, then you have repaired a huge fracture.
Meaning when you choose to refrain, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
somebody who has always done it, always their whole life from birth, there was no fracture, and they're kind of maintaining a structural stability.
Yeah.
Whereas those who have never refrained from breaking the negative mitzvah, they're like maintaining a brokenness, and then if they do start to keep the mitzvah, then they repair that structural
Yeah,
fraction.
100%. Yeah. Good intuition. Yeah, that's basically exactly how it's meaning. If I'm understanding you correctly, that let's say you yourself or a person is not doing a certain thing and hence maybe damaging it to some extent, over the course of their life, and they say, now I'm ready to do this thing, or I'm ready to refrain from this thing. So what they do is an amazing, amazing thing when they do that. Just the way that it goes with kind of tshuva that you're describing. In other words, the way that tshuva works is an unbelievable thing. Maybe we have to talk about it more at some point. The way that tshuva works is, it's true that there is a rectification. Let's say, there's a thing which was typically being damaged over here, and now a person is able to rebuild that. But the way that it works is that when someone does tshuva, what they do is they actually ignite a light up here at even higher than at Tzilut. Because the world of tshuva is like beyond. It's like quite an amazing thing. The tshuva is actually beyond even the system that we're talking about. So there's a light from Ohr Makif, which is even above all of this. And then what you do is you bring that light down to that location and you repair it. But what's happened along the way is you've actually benefited here and here, as well as here, and even here, because there's always a knock-on effect of everything in the higher worlds, lower worlds. It's that. So what you've done is exactly what you said, is you've repaired a site that was damaged. Moreover, you've actually improved the whole system in the course of doing so, because it's so this is this part of this idea of, like, it's quite an amazing thing of like the makom shabali tshuva umdim in tzadikim gemorim yocholim la'amod, is that there's a certain advantage of being about tshuva, of like not having done the right thing always and then starting to do the right thing. You're in some way, that if a person, as I'm saying, is a tzaddik where they never did anything wrong, so there obviously are good things about that, but they actually are not privy to ignite something which is above even at tzidut. Whereas a person who did an aveira, did the wrong thing, they're actually able to access even higher points and lead the world to a pretty unbelievable place. So yeah.
I also think it's important to recognize though that, like, just because somebody has never broken this and has not caused the breaking, like, they are also contributing to like maintaining the whole system.
100%. Yeah. Everyone has different jobs. Everyone has different jobs. Yeah, it's not.
I've heard it said that like people are like, well, what can I do?
Yeah. No. They can do a big thing. It's hard in some ways. Their job's easier and harder. But what's hard for them is to grow. Is because if you are all right. Okay, I'm like broken. Okay, so I know I need to grow. That's like easy. Like obviously, I've got like a million things to work on. Like I can give you the list. But like right. But if you're like doing all right, like there's still levels to grow, but it's sometimes harder to do that. So that's again, there's both sides are true. The Rashi brings when in terms of Yitzhak and Rivka. So they both davened for a child, and the Torah says that Hashem answered the prayer of Yitzhak. So what happened? What about Rivka? So it said the tefillah of a tzaddik ben tzaddik, of this righteous person, son of a righteous person, was more powerful than the tzaddik ben Rasha. Rivka was a great person, but she came from a problematic lineage, and so in that sense, so that his tefillah was greater. So this is the way I understand that, is that like for him to do that and still have meaning in his tefillah is a big deal. So there's different ways to understand it, but basically the bottom line is that there's advantages of different things that everyone can bring to the table, and it's only with everyone that we have everything that we need. I think Hadar was first thing.
Just have a question in terms of like this whole light shining back onto earth. Like, it's a spiritual light. Like, what does that entail? Like, is it like of your aura? Is it like what really is it?
Yeah.
How does that help us in the physical world? Yeah,
so I think that we can come to. Maybe I should also just slightly finish the story a little bit. We'll still come back to Elena's question, but just I think it's going to help. So anyway, we talked about, so you think about doing the mitzvah, then it's done. Then you start making the impression about it. Then it invests in you and it surrounds you with this light. And then what you do is you actually do the mitzvah. And when you do the mitzvah, and it said, and the Nefesh HaChaim said this is going to help you to actually do the mitzvah. Come back to that. And then when you actually do the mitzvah, what you do, and that's actually this time saying the bracha, and what you do is you actually send the light back up there. And the thing is like it was almost like it was like brewing. It was like getting there, and then fireworks start going in that place, and like and the the world is just looking in a completely more ameliorated state than it was before. So anyway, so just that's kind of like the full picture of the back and forth. And as we mentioned, I guess the full picture is that everything in the higher world affects everything in the lower world. So there will be knock-on effects seen down here. I don't think that's what you're asking about, but you're asking about the Ohr Makif, or you're asking about
I guess both, like what do you mean by the
so yes, there's two things. The Ohr Makif is a bit more personal. The surrounding light is a bit more personal. It's something which is for the person who's doing the mitzvah. So in as much as it's for the person who's doing the mitzvah, so what we have in the Nefesh HaChaim is it says it helps you to complete the mitzvah. What's going on behind the scenes is that when a person is trying to do a mitzvah, many negative spiritual forces are trying their absolute best to get you to not do that. Because what you're about to do is something very, very positive for the world, and hence very negative for their particular aims in the world. So they fight back. And this is a thing which you can someday, again, there's exceptions to all these rules, but if I recall correctly, the Gra says one of the ways that you can know if you're doing the right thing is if it's hard. Because then you see that, oh, like they're fighting against me, that means I must be onto something over here. Again, there's exceptions to every rule, but that's something that I think the Gra says. So you'll feel that. You can have antagonism. That's like antagonism almost like from the inside. You can have antagonism from the outside. You have the world is like not wanting you to do what you're doing. And this is going to help you. So this is kind of like this. I think the analogy is kind of what we're talking about. Is like imagine that you're putting yourself in that positive environment. Now you kind of like have that strength to be able to go and actually do that thing, which is the positive thing to do. And so that's kind of the way that you'd feel it, is you may feel a certain enjoyment, the truth is most of us are walking through life, we may not have felt anything necessarily. So you have to open your mind and it's time. You have to like open your mind a little bit to what's going on in order for these things to be able to speak to you. But so it's been helping you, although you didn't notice. But if you can, now we all know about this, so we can start to notice that actually we're going to get help with that kind of thing as well. We'll hopefully before the end kind of bring it into an even broader picture of how it can help you in life. But at least in terms of that particular action, that's the one thing. In terms of the what's called the Ohr, the light which is going to come down as a result of you having actually completed the mitzvah, you've ignited that sight in the world, and it's going to come down here. So that means wealth, health, blessing, positive morality. It means basically the world becomes a better place, and the way that you just like kind of like shone positive energy into the whole world. So you're doing in a kind of more spread out way what you were privy to, in the moments before the mitzvah. So that's some thoughts on that. I think Eliana's next. We were talking. It was in an earlier stage when we were talking about. Okay, if you can shout out when it comes. Yeah.
Is that where the concept of a shliach mitzvah comes from?
Yeah, very good application. I wasn't thinking about that. Meaning just to explain that concept. So, do you want to explain the concept? I can explain it. So basically, the idea is quite an interesting thing. For example, there's like a thing which if you're going on a trip, sometimes someone will give you like a coin and say, give it to tzedakah on the other end. Because there's a certain spiritual protection that what's called a shliach mitzvah gets. Someone who's on their way to do a mitzvah, they get a certain spiritual protection. What's the mechanism? Okay, that's the sugula. Okay, what's the actual mechanism of that? Mechanism of that is you're now on a mitzvah project. You know what happens when you're on a mitzvah project? You get surrounded by the Ohr Makif. And that's until the gemira, until you've completed the mitzvah. So basically, they are enabling you to be surrounded by a spiritual light on your trip to wherever it is, and then helping you to get all the way there. And on the other end, you're gonna be able to do the mitzvah. You'll have the positive, results of having done that mitzvah at the end of the day. But what they're helping you with is with the journey. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
So there's other kinds of shliach mitzvah as well, but that's a classic one which comes up. Yeah, Liana.
Oh, got tzaddiks and Bolsheviks.
Yeah.
And I think that people like too often map that statement
Yeah.
onto Baal to Shuba did
Yeah.
grow up religious.
Yeah.
And from birth.
Yeah.
And it's not the same
Correct.
thing.
Correct. It's not at all. Yeah.
Just because you grew up religious doesn't mean you can't be a Baal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah.
You've never done anything wrong.
Correct. There's a few levels that's just important to point out. What you're saying is that when Chazal talk about tzaddik or tzaddik ben tzaddik, versus a Baal Tshuva, they're not necessarily using it in all the same ways as we use those words nowadays, or even, the from birth. It's not necessarily like that, because it's more like everything's nuanced, everything is very, very personal. So if you let's think about two examples of people, like, there's someone who is a Baal Tshuva in that they didn't grow up religious, but like, they weren't necessarily like doing wrong things like on purpose. They didn't really necessarily know. So the negative impacts in the world that they're having are much smaller because they didn't know that they were doing anything wrong. And as we're seeing from here, it's a lot about what's going on in one's minds that is going to implicate how much you're going to affect what's going on in the spiritual realms. So that's what, that's on the one hand. In contrast to a Baal Tshuva, like a person who really knew and then they really went off, or even just in one area, they just did a wrong thing, or they really went off entirely. And for them to be able to come back is a pretty big deal. It's very hard. And so these people are also very special who are able to do that. And, yeah, like I had a roommate in yeshiva, in one of the yeshivas I was in, who was like, he grew up in a place, I was like totally anonymized the story. He grew up in a place where it was like very religious, and I was like, why is this guy on a similar learning level to me? Like it's like a very serious place that he grew up. And basically it came out, he's basically his whole teenage years, he just smoked weed for like all his teenage years. And like to be at the stage he was then, to be like making like so many, it was like an amazing thing. Plus he was super self-conscious. He was like very about himself because he was in these environments where people hadn't done that and he had done that. And so he's overcoming to be able to do that. So that's a big version of a Baal Tshuva, in that sense. And again, endless details, but yeah, it's important to note to just like not necessarily map on words that Chazal use to exactly the same way that we use those words in common parlance. Good to bear that in mind. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so so how can this help us in life? Let me just say a couple of things. So basically, to know this is pretty amazing. So obviously, the way that we've talked about it so far is that it can help you in the context of a mitzvah. You're trying to do a mitzvah, and to think about the mitzvah for a minute before, this is part of we were talking a little bit last week about, a lot of there's certain Kabbalistic meditations that people say, like Shem Yichud, Kutcher Brifa, etc., before they do certain things. I used to not be into those, and I still, in principle, I don't like to make commitments to do things which are over and above like the halakha, because just halakha is hard enough, and it's not technically an obligation or anything. But I started to get into them basically because of this reason, even though I don't understand most of the things that they're saying. But what I am doing is I'm taking a minute before doing the mitzvah to think about doing the mitzvah. And then what's happening over here is like a whole different system is going on when you like take that minute to think about it. You still get the light to some extent if you just jump into it, which unfortunately is quite a reality. That's like happening a lot of the time. You like fire into the mitzvah. You do get the light to some extent, but you enhance the light that you get from the moment before the mitzvah. That's on the one hand. That's kind of the direct application of the Nefesh HaChaim to what he's talking about. But we can utilize that for our lives. So let's say that you have decisions to make in life, or it just in like a particular decision to make, or you have to do something and not in a good mood, or it's been a hard day, or all kinds of things, like things are going to be hard to do. So you can use this as a quote unquote a hack, a tachbolot yikneh. You can use this as a strategy. Is all you need to do is think about a mitzvah. And if you think about a mitzvah, then you're mitigating. It's not going to save the world, because it doesn't mean that there's the negative thing which was affecting you before has completely gone away, but you've just added a huge positive benefit. You just added a huge kind of like ammunition to the side of what you really want to do or what really needs to be done. You've just put yourself in a good environment. So this is the kind of spiritual microclimate thing, is that you can, like, would it be easier to make this decision in a good environment? Yes. You can actually do that. You can put yourself in a good environment. Again, you still should do the things that the Rambam says about seeking that in a very practical ways, but sometimes it's not possible. No, it's not possible. It's the reality. Like your various reasons, like, you're just not going to make a career change at this stage of life. You've got different people to support. It's just not going to work. What you can do is you can make your own microclimate. a good environment. And that's something which is really important. So how can you do? So you can do that in the ways of, like, as we say, like you can think about mitzvah. I've thought about some things which you can do this with. So as we mentioned before, Lola like brought up, things which are very frequent. So for example, like ben adam lechavero. So v'ahavta re'acha kamocha. You can always use that, especially if you're gonna have to deal with the person, right? So you do it. So I'm thinking like Shema, we do v'ahavta re'acha kamocha. I said it in the words of tefillah there. You can say that or not. It can help. It's not intrinsic to the system. And all of a sudden, you're going to have much more on your team in terms of being able to actually deal with that person well. Or there's another basically one of the other catch-alls is valachta b'drachav, that to walk in the ways of Hashem. So what Hashem is got, basically the way that Chazal says, Hashem has got good midot. Hashem is rachum, Hashem is chanun, Hashem is merciful and compassionate. So you can say that's a mitzvah d'oraita. That's somewhere here. So when you say like, okay, I need to deal with the situation, it's going to be really hard. I want to do the mitzvah v'alachta b'drachav, to walk in the ways of Hashem. Then what you just did is amazing. You just lit up a whole thing up here, and it's surrounding you, and you're now surrounded with the light of v'alachta b'drachav, and it's going to make it slightly easier. I don't know how much easier it's going to make it. Maybe a little bit, maybe a lot, but you've got to take it. It's you have to take all the help that you can get, because life is hard. So you have to use all these things that you can get. So that's the way to do it. I did on the way here. I was thinking, I was like, what's the mitzvah that we're doing now? By the way, so I know I'm about to go give shiurim. So like I thought I should probably put myself into practice. So the mitzvah is v'limadtem otam penechem, that you should teach them to your children. And Chazal say, the Rambam says in Talmud Torah that what's the mitzvah to teach people who are not your children? The mitzvah to teach your children, because Talmidim are priyim bani, that students are children, are called your children, not children yiladim, like your bani. So that's the dynamic which is basically going on. So I was like getting myself up for the class. That's what's about to happen, and so. So it was a good opportunity to get up for things by doing that, thinking about that for 1 minute before. And then the other thing, like in general, even just any kind of learning Torah, thinking about a pasuk, thinking about anything, any Torah thing, that also works in the system, because that is a mitzvah itself. Learning Torah is a mitzvah. Think about something in your head. Say like having a down day. So Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. Says, oh, it's a pasuk in Tehillim. So you're now surrounded by the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, and that's going to help you in whatever you need in life. So this is basically the idea for today. We want to think about being able to grow and do good things in life in the conventional ways and in the unconventional ways. To do in the kind of like the slow grind build, that's true, but you also have to do the tachbalot way. You have to do the hacks, you have to do the strategies way as well. And one of the big things in terms of that is to put ourselves in good environments, to connect to good people, to try as much as possible to be in environments which are aligned with our values, as much as possible. And sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. In either case, there's something that you can do to always enhance your ability to deal with whatever situation you have, which is tap into the system of the Ohr Makif, the surrounding light, where you think about mitzvah, or you think about a pasuk or something like that, and all of a sudden you're in, to some extent, some spiritual microclimate, a positive environment, and that's going to help us along the way to do better things. So that's us for today. May we be able to think and to live. Yeah.
Thank you.